Chapter 1. The Promise of Childhood. The Rathore Haveli, years ago. The corridors still smelled faintly of sandalwood and rosewater, the air carrying the quiet dignity of a palace that had seen centuries pass. Inside one of the more private chambers, a young girl in a neatly pressed school uniform sat cross-legged beside the enormous carved teakwood bed. Her plaits fell over her shoulders, her socks slightly crumpled, and in her small hands, she clutched a packet of toffees she had sneaked in from her satchel. But her eyes weren't on the sweets. They were fixed on a framed photograph resting on the bedside table. The photograph of a young Arjun Rathore, barely in his late teens then, dressed in a crisp white shirt, gaze stern even at that age, the faintest trace of a smile, refusing to soften his jaw. Meera Rajput's lips curled into a secretive smile. She leaned forward, resting her chin on her hands, whispering to the photograph as though it could hear her. "Arjun Rathore, Mr. Iceberg himself," she murmured with all the seriousness her 12-year-old self could muster. "You don't know me properly yet, but one day you'll have no choice. You will marry me, and I'll make you smile whether you like it or not. That's my promise." She tapped the frame lightly, as if sealing her vow, and popped a toffee in her mouth. Just then, a small voice piped up from the doorway. "What are you doing here?" Startled, Meera spun around. Standing there was Arav, Arjun's much younger brother, still a mischievous boy in half pants, his hair messy from running around the gardens. He tilted his head, frowning in curiosity. "Who are you? And why are you in Bhaiya's room?" Meera straightened at once, attempting her most grown-up tone. "I am Meera, and one day I'm going to be your Bobby. So, you'd better start being respectful." Arav blinked, then burst into laughter, rolling his eyes. "Bobby? You?" "Yes," she said firmly, puffing out her chest. "You'll see. Your Arjun Bhaiya may look very serious, but he belongs to me, so you better get used to it." To sweeten her decree, she extended a handful of toffees toward him. "Here. Be good, and don't tell anyone I was here." Arav snatched them eagerly, unwrapping one before popping it into his mouth. But after a moment, he wrinkled his nose. "These are nice, but, you know. These are Arjun Bhaiya's favorite, not mine. Next time, if you really want me on your side, bring sesame candies. Those are mine." Meera grinned, unfazed. "Done. Sesame for you, toffees for Arjun, everyone happy. Now go play and don't disturb me. I'm busy talking to my future husband." Arav stared at her for a moment, then shook his head, muttering, "Girls are crazy," before running off down the corridor. Left alone again, Meera turned back to the photograph, her young face softening into determination far beyond her years. She touched the frame gently and whispered, "It's settled then. Someday, you'll see. You'll be mine." And though the palace remained silent, somewhere deep in its ancient walls, it felt as though history itself had just been written. A vow made by a stubborn little girl to the boy who would grow into her impossible, disciplined, untouchable Iceberg. Chapter 2. The Palace and the Boundaries. The Rathore Ancestral Palace rose like a jewel on the banks of Lake Pichola. White marble domes kissed the sky. Sandstone courtyards sprawled under the golden afternoon sun, and intricate jarakas caught the breeze like whispers of forgotten royalty. For most visitors, it was a monument. For Meera Rajput, it was destiny, She stepped out of her car, the long scarf of her indigo business suit fluttering around her as she tilted her head back to take in the grandeur. She was no stranger to heritage buildings. She had restored dozens across India. But this was different. This palace was where it had all begun, where a schoolgirl once sat by a royal bed, gazing at the photograph of a young Arjun Rathore, whispering to it with all the seriousness of a vow, "No matter what, you will have to marry me someday." And today, after years of hard work and relentless determination, she was back. Not as that wide-eyed girl in a school uniform, but as Meera Rajput, award-winning architect, handpicked for the Rathore Palace restoration project. The crunch of footsteps on marble broke her trance. Turning, she caught sight of the man who had unknowingly been at the center of her dreams for years. Arjun Rathore, the ruthless tycoon who carried discipline in his veins, whose name alone could silence a boardroom. His reputation had preceded him everywhere, but in person, he was sharper, taller, more intense than even her memories allowed. The modern cut of his charcoal grey suit clashed and yet oddly blended with the palace's timeless opulence. His eyes, dark and unyielding, swept over her with the cool detachment of a man appraising an asset, not greeting a colleague. He gave the faintest nod, as though acknowledging her existence was concession enough. "Miss Rajput," he said, voice smooth but distant. "You're punctual." Meera's lips curved into a smile that carried both confidence and a secret only she knew. "And you're exactly as I imagined. Tall, serious, and about as warm as a monsoon cloud." A flicker, barely there, passed through his eyes. Surprise? Annoyance? She couldn't tell. He only gestured toward the carved archway that led inside. "Shall we?" As they walked, she let her fingers trail over the marble pillars, her anklets chiming against the floor. "If these walls could speak, Mr. Rathore, I wonder how many secrets they'd spill." His reply came sharp, precise, like a blade. They wouldn't spill any. They'd remain silent, as they should. Meera turned, her eyes sparkling with mischief, always so serious. "Do you ever allow yourself to enjoy beauty without dissecting it, Mr. Rathore?" His gaze lingered a moment longer than necessary, her confident stance, the teasing curve of her lips, before he looked away. "This project is not about beauty. It's about efficiency, structure, and precision. Which is why..." His voice dropped lower, uncompromising. "I'd prefer if we kept our interactions strictly professional. No jokes, no familiarity." The words hung in the air like a decree. Even the lake breeze seemed to pause. For a moment, Meera almost laughed, because she remembered the boy in the photograph, the one she had claimed as hers long ago. He could try all he wanted to build walls of discipline and distance, but she already knew. The iceberg would crack. She dipped her head gracefully, her smile softening, but never fading. "As you wish, Mr. Rathore. I wouldn't want to melt the wrong ice after all." His jaw tightened. He had expected her to jab again, but instead, her elegance unsettled him more than any sharp retort. They walked through the courtyards together, him with crisp, measured strides, hands clasped behind his back, eyes scanning every column with military precision, her trailing a step behind, notebook poised, eyes dancing with a secret game of her own. At one point, she paused to admire a faded fresco, lovers beneath a peacock sky. She touched it, reverently. Even centuries ago, Mr. Rathore, they painted love on walls. Perhaps you can dislike it, but you cannot erase it. Arjun stiffened, eyes hardening as something flickered behind them. Love is irrelevant. What matters is legacy. And legacy is built on discipline, not distractions. Meera tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, biting back the reply that hovered on her tongue. Not yet. This was only the beginning. Her smile returned, small, secretive, almost triumphant. Because if he thought discipline could keep him safe, he had no idea how long she'd been preparing for this moment. After all, a promise made in childhood was not so easily broken. Chapter 3. The Man Who Owned the Room. The Durbar Hall of the palace had been transformed into a temporary conference space. Long polished tables beneath crystal chandeliers. Laptops glowing faintly against the backdrop of centuries-old frescoes. A dozen staff members, investors and consultants sat poised, waiting for the man of the hour. Arjun Rathore entered with the kind of presence that silenced a room without a single word. His dark suit fit him to perfection, crisp lines echoing the discipline of the man himself. He carried no papers, no notes. He never needed them. Gentlemen, ladies, his deep voice rolled across the hall, calm yet commanding. Time is money. Let us not waste either. Meera, seated midway down the table, in a flowing ivory kurta with delicate silver embroidery, looked up from her notepad and forgot to look away. She watched him as he spoke, the quiet authority in his tone, the way his long fingers rested against the table with precise confidence, the hard, chiseled lines of his face illuminated by the chandelier above. His every word was measured, decisive, unshakable. God, he makes even deadlines sound sexy, she thought helplessly, her lips curving into a smile before she could stop herself. Her heart gave a little flutter when he gestured toward a set of designs, his sleeve pulling back just enough to reveal the strength of his wrist, his movements smooth, assured. She had met countless powerful men in her career, but none quite like Arjun Rathore. He didn't just command respect. He drew it like breath. Meera's gaze lingered too long, and then it happened. Arjun paused mid-sentence, his sharp eyes flicking across the table and landing directly on her. For one piercing second, his dark gaze locked with hers. He raised a brow, the barest flicker of disapproval curving his mouth downward. A frown. Heat rushed up Meera's cheeks. She immediately dropped her eyes to her notes, scribbling nonsense numbers that made no sense at all. Her pulse hammered in her ears. Oh no. He caught me staring. He definitely knows. He's going to think I'm some silly schoolgirl with a crush on the head boy. Across the table, Arjun resumed speaking as though nothing had happened. But his frown lingered, and Meera could feel it like a weight pressing against her skin. She forced herself to sit straighter, to look composed, professional. Yet her hand trembled slightly as she turned the page of her notebook. For the rest of the meeting, she dared not look at him again. But her heart refused to listen, betraying her with every beat. And somewhere deep inside, though she would never admit it aloud, she realized she was in trouble. serious, delicious trouble. Chapter 4. An awkward collision. The Rathore Haveli glowed like a jewel under 1,000 golden lights. The lake mirrored its silhouette, domes shimmering against the velvet night sky. Inside, the palace was alive with murmurs of conversation, the clinking of glasses, and soft strains of a sitar blending with jazz. Meera Rajput adjusted the palu of her black chiffon sari as she entered with her colleagues. The delicate shimmer of sequins caught the light, and her silver jhumkas swayed with every step. She had to admit. The place looked breathtaking, though the host himself seemed determined never to crack a smile. At the center of the gathering, Arjun Rathore stood tall in a classic black tuxedo, his every line perfect, his posture commanding. He raised his glass as he addressed the small, elite group of industrialists, diplomats, and investors. "In business," he said, his voice steady, deep, and resonant, "success is not measured by what we achieve once, but by the discipline to repeat it again and again. Tonight, we celebrate not just a venture, but a vision." Polite applause filled the hall. Meera clapped too, though her gaze betrayed her heart. The way his shoulders squared with effortless authority, the hint of steel in his words, the curve of his mouth. He was magnificent. "Stop staring, Meera," she warned herself, quickly raising her glass of sparkling water to her lips, hiding her expression behind its rim. This time, she did not let her admiration slip. Her smile was practiced, polite, professional, but inside, her heart was tumbling like a teenager's diary. Later, as the night stretched on, Meera grew restless. The polite small talk between her seniors and the other guests felt stiff, the laughter hollow. She slipped away quietly, her sandals clicking against the marble floor, as she wandered into one of the Haveli's quieter corridors. The arched ceilings soared above her, lit by lanterns throwing warm shadows across faded murals of kings and queens. She trailed her fingers along a carved lattice, whispering to herself, "These walls have seen more stories than all of us put together." Lost in observing the beautiful architecture of the Haveli, she turned a corner and collided headfirst into someone's chest. "Ow!" she gasped, stumbling back, her clutch nearly slipping from her hands. A firm grip steadied her, a very familiar grip. Arjun Rathore. The top buttons of his shirt open, exposing his muscular chest. He looked less like the intimidating tycoon and more like a dangerously attractive man at ease, his brows arched, dark eyes narrowing. "Miss Rajput." Meera's heart flipped, but she pasted on her brightest smile. "Oh, hello. Fancy meeting you here." He crossed his arms, expression unreadable. "This is my Haveli?" "Yes, well, I was just appreciating your architecture," she stammered, her voice a pitch higher than usual. "The Haveli's architecture, I mean. Not yours." Her eyes slid down on his muscular chest. "Definitely not yours." She nervously gulped. His lips twitched. Almost, but not quite, a smile. "You shouldn't be wandering alone. Guests usually prefer the party." "I got bored," she admitted, biting her lip. "Everyone's talking about profits, mergers, and stock prices. My only contribution would have been about ceiling arches. Not exactly champagne talk, is it?" For a moment, silence stretched between them. His eyes lingered on her as though weighing her words. She fidgeted, her bangles jingling like guilty accomplices. Well, she blurted suddenly, eager to escape the awkwardness. I'll just wander back now. To the party? To the stock prices? Lovely stock prices. She turned too quickly and smacked straight into the same pillar twice. Heat rushed up her face as she muttered, "Graceful, Meera, very graceful." Behind her, she heard a low sound, not quite a laugh, but close. Arjun's. She froze. Did Arjun Rathore almost laugh? Her pulse hammered, half with embarrassment, half with something else she dared not name. Without looking back, she scurried toward the hall, determined to pretend nothing had happened. But the image of his face, tired, amused, almost human, lingered with her long after. Chapter 5? The Foolish Heart. Meera kicked off her sandals the moment she stepped into her apartment, the soft thud echoing in the quiet. The city glittered outside her window, but all she could think about was the glint of amusement in Arjun Rathore's eyes. "Oh, God," she groaned, burying her face into a cushion. "What was that performance, Meera?" Wandering into corridors, babbling about architecture, crashing into pillars like some clumsy heroine from a bad film, she rolled onto her back, staring at the ceiling. Her mind replayed the evening like a mischievous reel. Arjun's commanding speech, the way his tuxedo fit him like it had been stitched to his soul, his steady grip when she nearly toppled over, the flicker of something almost warm in his expression. And then, her, flustered, embarrassed, a walking disaster. She pressed a palm to her forehead. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. He must think I'm incapable of walking straight, let alone restoring a palace. A part of her wanted to laugh. Another part, the bigger, heavier part, felt something she couldn't quite name. A restless awareness, a ticklish ache. He wasn't just a client anymore. He'd become a man who occupied far too much space in her thoughts, which was dangerous. She sat up suddenly, determination tightening her jaw. Enough. No more foolishness. No more staring, no more silly smiles, no more daydreams. From now on, I keep my distance. Strictly professional. The words rang bold, but even as she said them, a softer whisper inside betrayed her resolve. Because she knew herself too well, she could keep her distance with her words, her behavior, her laughter. But her eyes would betray her every time. And so she decided, if she couldn't stay away, she would simply watch from afar, quietly, secretly, like an architect admiring a monument she could never touch. Meera Rajput pulled the cushion to her chest and sighed. Yes, Arjun Rathore. From tomorrow, you'll never know how much space you take up in my mind. But her heart, stubborn and foolish, fluttered anyway. Chapter 6. From afar. The palace courtyard buzzed with activity. Engineers huddled over blueprints, workers hauled marble tiles across scaffolding, and junior architects darted about with laptops and clipboards. The morning sun cast golden beams through the arched charaukas, illuminating centuries-old carvings that seemed to smile at the bustle of modern plans. Meera Rajput stood near the central fountain, sketchbook in hand. Her posture was calm, professional, her face composed, but her heart was a stubborn traitor. Because across the courtyard, Arjun Rathore commanded the space like a general at war. Tall, severe, immaculate, in his tailored navy shirt with sleeves rolled to the elbow, he stood surrounded by his senior managers, His voice, low, decisive, unyielding, carried over the noise of construction. No delays. Every column, every arch must meet standard. Compromise on quality is compromise on legacy. And that is unacceptable. Meera lowered her gaze to her sketchbook, pretending to adjust a line. But in truth, she was watching him from the corner of her eye. The way he gestured, precise and economical. The way he frowned slightly when a manager failed to understand. The way sunlight caught in his hair, making the rigid perfection of him look almost dangerously beautiful. Stop it, Meera. Her pencil pressed too hard, leaving a deep groove in the paper. Professional? Strictly professional. And yet, when he leaned over to inspect a blueprint, his cuff brushing against the page, Meera's breath hitched. How can a man make looking at measurements seem magnetic? As if sensing her gaze, Arjun suddenly looked up. Their eyes met across the courtyard. Meera's stomach flipped. She quickly ducked her head, feigning an intense focus on her sketches, flipping the page too fast as though she had urgent ideas bursting to life. Her cheeks burned. Idiot. He definitely saw you staring. Again. From his end, Arjun's eyes lingered on her for a fraction longer. His expression gave nothing away, but his jaw tightened ever so slightly before he returned to his men, issuing another crisp instruction. Meera exhaled slowly, willing her heartbeat to steady. Distance, Rajput. You promised yourself distance. And so she remained where she was, watching him, only when she was certain he wasn't looking, admiring quietly, silently, like one would admire the play of light on marble. Close enough to see him, far enough, never to touch. Chapter 7. Caught in the Act. The morning sun filtered through the tall jarakas of the palace, casting golden patterns across the polished marble floors. Meera Rajput crouched beside a partially restored fountain, adjusting her sketches with a precise hand. She was deep in concentration, but her eyes kept straying across the courtyard. Arjun Rathore was inspecting the newly installed pillars, his dark brows furrowed, sleeves rolled neatly, every movement deliberate and commanding. Meera's heart skipped again. She lowered her gaze, pretending to shade a corner of her drawing. Focus, Meera. Distance. Professional. Then came the disaster. A loose tile on the courtyard floor, perhaps dislodged by the morning workers, shifted beneath her foot. She stumbled forward, letting out a tiny yelp. Before she could steady herself, a firm hand shot out. Miss Rajput. Her eyes flew open. Arjun Rathore, tall, broad, impeccably dressed, even in rolled-up sleeves, held her by the elbow. His dark eyes bore into hers, and for a terrifying moment, she felt exposed. Are you always this distracted? He asked, his tone low, clipped, and very clearly teasing, though he would never admit it aloud. Meera blinked. I was, She flushed, waving a hand toward her sketches. Just focusing on the fountain details. Structural integrity, very professional, I assure you. Arjun's lips twitched, almost a smile. Professional, he repeated, his voice skeptical. Right. He released her hand, letting her stumble back slightly, and she caught herself on a column, her cheeks burning. She wanted to hide her face in her scarf, but instead, she straightened quickly, lifting her chin. Yes, professional. Strictly professional, she said, hoping her voice sounded convincing. But Arjun, standing too close, observed her with a sharp, calculating gaze. He noticed a faint blush on her cheeks, the way her hair had fallen messily across her forehead, and the small sparkle of admiration he had caught her casting his way. Not once, but multiple times. Interesting, he thought, his frown softening slightly. The architect watches me like I'm some monument she wants to study, or maybe more. Meera, meanwhile, cursed herself silently. He's definitely noticed. He probably thinks I'm a fool. Arjun turned slightly to inspect a column, giving her the tiniest bit of distance. She exhaled, adjusting her dupatta with trembling fingers, trying to reclaim her composure. I'll get back to work, she muttered, moving briskly away. Arjun watched her go, amused, yet secretly intrigued. Professional, yes, but the glances and that stumble. She's delightful. And just like that, the balance of power shifted ever so subtly. The Iceberg had noticed the heat. Subscribe quickly to know the full story.